Hello, everybody. It's time for session 10, and today we'll be talking about testing your content, playtesting your content, getting feedback for your content, and then how to utilize that feedback. So let's get into it immediately here. Here we have the Escape from Babylon tutorial, and we already playtested this by ourselves enough to see that when I start the tutorial from the beginning, I can start the previewer, go through the flow all the way till the end of the tutorial, so that there shouldn't be at least no breaks on the way anymore. So we have a full tutorial that we can use. Once we get to this stage, it's time to playtest the content with people who have not played the game before. If this is not available to you, then use people who have played the game, but obviously you're gonna lose a lot of information there because the people can sort of fill the gaps themselves. I made a bit of a presentation for this session, so we'll take a look at a few slides here. So first of all, playtesting is very important, and I'm mainly going to focus on the moment when you have playtested the tutorial already yourself and you've done all the obvious fixes to it. But then it's at a point where you feel like, I think this is ready, but before it's published, it needs to be playtested with people who don't know the game. And as said here, playtest highlights important areas for improvement. There will always be something. I've done plenty of tutorials myself, and I've playtested plenty of tutorials. I have never created a tutorial where there wouldn't have been an abundance of feedback when it was the first time playtested. Even when I just playtested it myself, if it's a content that I created, there's already a lot of feedback. And even when I think like I'm sure I got everything, then when I see people using my product, I'm realizing like, oh, I need to fix a lot more. So playtest it with people who don't know the game, and distance yourself from that. I'm gonna show you an image of that in a moment. So make sure that you're not, if possible, you're not involved in the session other than being away from the table, observing what's happening, and making notes and not interfering. So don't help if people have the problem. Let them try to figure out the issue themselves. You just make a note that, okay, players had this issue at this point. I want to make sure that I fix this. Only if it's absolutely necessary. So let's say players hit a dead end with your tutorial and they don't know how to continue, or they misunderstood some information so badly that you see that, oh, okay, this is I need to make a note myself here that I absolutely need to fix this thing in my content, but also I have a mistake in this content. This should actually say this. Okay, cool. Continue, and then you distance yourself again. And reward your playtesters. They're helping you to make the content better. So be it a very verbal thank you, or getting them snacks and drinks and whatever. But make sure that they're happy to come over again to playtest your stuff. So this is the quick image I made. You have your tutorial on the table here. And then you have your players learning the game at the table, and this is you, far away, not helping, but just observing and taking notes. Ideally, this is the situation you can make happen when you're playtesting your tutorial. Sometimes, for example, often myself, it's the easiest if I play a two-player game with somebody, in which case I am at the table playing the game myself as well. In these moments, what I always do, I have the other person use the tutorial, and I try to just shut up. I play my turns, but I let them use the tutorial and take the lead on that. And I'm trying to distance myself again, even though I am at the table and I am playing the game at the same time. But I try not to, whenever it's my turn and my turn to use the tutorial, I try not to then go through parts that I know that I want to see the other person use and see how well they understand them. So whenever possible, make this happen. Now we're gonna next talk about the most difficult part of playtesting. It's getting feedback, and this is not always easy. The feedback can be difficult to accept. Let me just take my notes here just to make sure that I mention everything here. So remember that the playtesters are there to help you improve your content. Feedback is not often delivered well. It can be pointy even and very critical. And try not to focus on the fact that people don't always know how to deliver constructive criticism, and give you like supportive feedback. They might just point out, oh, this didn't work. Oh, this is I don't understand this, and just try to hear, rather ignore their delivery and try to hear what the actual issue is and make a note of that so you can fix it. And the customer is always right. Um, the reason I have it here is that if you see players having an issue with the game while using your tutorial, uh, it's something you need to fix. There shouldn't, or let's put it this way, it's often something you can improve in your content. So if you see players having that moment of confusion or whatever it is, try not to blame the players by like, oh well, they were just stupid, or well, they figured it out later. Um, Rather try to think, how could I tweak my content that this issue would never even have risen. There are always things that you can't know, and especially when your tutorial is used by thousands of people and you playtest it maybe once or a few times. So there will always be things. The nice thing is that with Dized, the tutorial can always be improved, but at least you try to find the majority of the things that you can improve. So yeah, try not to dismiss the feedback by blaming the players or the situation, but try always to kind of look at, well, can I make this better with my content? And very importantly, write the feedback down. Now for this, we do have a little bit of a tool that we use ourselves, and I'm going to show it to you. If you go to Dized Portal Guide, and you'll find under General the free assets folder where you found the Escape from Babylon assets as well. Dized free asset library. So here are 3 files. There's a template for writing your tutorial flow script, which we took a look at earlier this course. Dized rules template, same thing, but for making the rules. And then there's a project feedback template. So if you open this, well, there's a this is an there are some examples here already, but the first thing you do is file, make a copy, and then you just select a folder in your Google Drive, and you can make a copy of this, or you can download it as an XLS file, or any other format, and then just use any tool you want. The idea of this feedback sheet is that you mark yourself down. Well, is it a bug? Is it a note? Is it a suggestion? So bug is typically something that you absolutely need to fix, and the priority for something like that would often be very high. Note can just be, it could, for example, just be music was great. So you wanted to, maybe there's a note of it, but typically something that doesn't require an action. Suggestion might be something that you type down, and then you see if the suggestion is something that's worthwhile to implement in the tutorial. So and so in these few examples we have here, we have all of these different kinds. The colors just mean that what is the stage? Has it only been reported? Is it being fixed? So that's yellow. Is it already fixed? When it goes green, and it just adds the strike through to the text, so you can see that, okay, I don't need to handle that anymore. And you can make an additional note here that what is this? There's a typo. Well, if there's a special note that you want to make here, typo fixed or whatever, or something, the music was very loud during the setup, so you can put here that the new music added or whatever it is, fixed, like that. So when you make a copy of this, you can freely just delete all of these, and then you start creating your feedbacks here. Typically this you can add later. So let's see, tutorial. Let's I typically just make suggestions, and then I change them later on to bugs or notes, depending. Here you can have the urgency. 0 is not urgent at all. 5 is the highest urgency. So how important it is, what is the priority of the fix that you need to handle it. And rule or step name. So if you're doing a tutorial, you want to have your step name here. The way, if you're doing your playtesting with the previewer, so you have your computer on the table, people are playing with that. ideally you don't need to interfere with that session at all. But for example, if there's clearly a step that, okay, I need to make a recording of this, what was the problem here? You can always, within the previewer, let me just start this from somewhere.
Cards will be played face down.
So you can always open up the inspector and you can find the current block here. This is also why it's very handy having these IDs for your steps, because now I would only need to write down, well, basically play 004, and then I can find this step easily and fix it. The other way how we sometimes do this, especially when we already make a version into the Dized app for publishers to try out, in that version we don't have this tool, so publishers can't tell us like exactly what step it was. In those cases, we just ask them to write down the first few words of the subtitle. So here, for example, the subtitle was "Cards will be played." So in the feedback form, we would just type in here, "Cards will be played." So that allows us to then use the list mode here. And let's just list all the steps here. And then when I do a find, cards, whatever was it, cards will be played. Cards will be played. So now there's only one result. I immediately found the step. So now I can locate it on my flow and see the fix that I need to do for it. So this feedback sheet is very useful. You write down your notes here, and then you have a very clear to-do list to go through. Well, I often, for example, here Joni tested, and I might even type down that it was a 2-player game, because sometimes that matches. The date when the note was given, and then okay, initially it's reported, and then you'll change those statuses once you start fixing the notes one by one. So having this sort of a written to-do list is really useful. I often, in the beginning when I was doing tutorials, I didn't always use this. I was like, yeah, I'll remember the things. And then there were 10 things, and I remembered to fix 3 of them. So making a note of every little thing is very helpful. And then you'll remember to fix all of those. Okay, let's go back into the... remember that feedback focuses on things that typically you have to improve. It's less often that people compliment your music choices and what brilliant animations you made. And we sort of have an expression here at Dized that which is from Futurama, that when you do things right, people don't know that you did anything at all. And it unfortunately applies to Dized tutorials as well. It's people don't even understand how great your tutorials was in the end. They only had a very good playing experience and they enjoyed the game, without being able to specifically pinpoint why the experience was so great. So just know that that's whenever people don't give you let's say critical feedback on something, it means that you did your job right. There's a lot of compliments that you might not be getting, which you should be getting. Critical feedback is always easier to give and highlight the issues. So try to remember that. And as said, the feedback can be difficult to accept. So it has been a learning process myself as well. I, in the beginning, was blaming players when I started creating the content. They're like, oh, well, you should have understood it from that or whatever. But then I sort of just decided that, you know what, customer is always right. I want to hear this feedback and I want to make my content better so that they don't have anything to complain about. And then I know that the tutorial will work for probably or like possibly tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people using that tutorial. So it's just for myself, it has been a learning journey, which is why I'm highlighting it. And feedback is very important in order to polish the content. I have never been able to create a content that would have been ready to publish as is. There's always things that come up in the playtest phase that I simply just didn't even think about in the content creation process. That these players might even have a question about this. Okay, I need to figure this out. And yeah, finally with the feedback, just don't let the feedback bring you down. It can be pretty devastating when you're working on your first content, especially when you're working on your first contents, and you put a lot of passion and love and effort into your product, and then you have a group of people playtest it and they shit on your thing, and it does not feel great. And when you're adding your 30th line of feedback into the sheet, it starts to feel like you have totally failed with your tutorial, which is absolutely not the case. It's be happy that you're getting a lot of things that you get that allow you to improve your content. And I've gone through sheets myself. I've gotten sheets where there has been over 100 lines of feedback, and I know what it is to receive that, and especially if it's written by somebody who doesn't how to say polish the like soften the the feedback. It can be sometimes it can really feel a bit harsh. uh, so just try to remember that people are trying to help you, and don't focus on the style of delivery, but just what is the message and what can I do with this to make my content better. um, so yeah, implement those notes one by one. Um, until your tutorial is polished and better. I want to show you one quick sheet. This was, for example, for this will be a feedback for the game Expeditions, which was done by our in-house content creator, who has done many tutorials. And I think this was the latest. I'm not sure if this was even the only one, but this was one of the feedback sheets that we've filled, and it has about 50 lines of feedback here. And this is a person who has done plenty of tutorials before, and that there's always things that come up in the playtest phase, and then one by one we just fix them. Here you can see some of the notes about those fixes that were made. But I wanted to show you this to just let you know there's be prepared that there will be feedback, and be happy that you're getting it, and that allows you to tweak your content for the better. Finally, I'm gonna go through a list of typical issues that come up in the feedback. I go through these because sometimes you can even when you go through your content for the final time before it goes to the playtesters, you can sort of think about these things, and maybe you already discover some things. One very typical thing is typos. In fact, I have typos in this particular tutorial right here, and I have been kindly pointed out by members in the Dized Discord that you know that you have typos in your content, and I absolutely trust that there are typos, but now I can fix them. So typos are very typical. Another one might be a weird voiceover, just because the voiceover engine didn't exactly know how to read something. A good example in the Expeditions tutorial was the mech. Players play with their mechs, and they use those to travel around, but the voiceover pronounces it mech. And obviously that's a very important term that's used a lot in the tutorial. So we need to figure out how do we get the voiceover to say mech, and we only replaced the C with a K, and it seemed to work. So then for every voiceover we just used that until we actually got the proper voice acting added to the content, and obviously then it wasn't an issue anymore. Loud music is very often a problem. Yesterday we talked about audio, and even though the music is always played by default at 15% volume, it still can be too loud, especially if it's sort of distracting music with loud instruments or so. So just don't be afraid to drop down those volume levels. It's better if the music is too quiet than too loud. Then sometimes info is in wrong order. Often players get confused about something that will actually be explained in the next step or the couple of next steps. And this just means that you need to figure out how to reorganize the information, because players should never be in that moment. So you need to just design in which order do I give players the information. So it's just tweak those steps so that players never have that issue. So when they need the information, they have already been told that information. And a way to fix this very often is for example, what I use, I will tell players that soon you will be playing your first turn. And then I will, a few autoplay steps, I will explain the things that they will need to know until I tell them that now, roll the die and move your meeple accordingly, or whatever the instruction is. But by then they have gotten that they know what the meeple is, they know what the die results are, and they can play. So it's just the order sometimes needs to be tweaked. Sometimes just missing info. You forgot to tell players about a very critical rule in the game, and it just slipped through the cracks when you were writing your script, and then it never came up in your script anymore, and you just forgot to add it. So easy thing just to add a step where the information is important. Forward button showing or not showing. Often when you do menus, you forget to hide the forward button, and if somebody taps that, it just goes to end of tutorial stage. And in fact, if you have one of those in the published content, there is no end of tutorial step. I believe the forward button just doesn't do anything because there is nothing to go to. The end of tutorial step that you will get in Dized, I'll show it to you just that we know what we're talking about. This one. So players in the Dized app won't see this. What would happen for them, they would just keep tapping this button here, but nothing would happen. So those obviously need to be then fixed. If there's a button and players can tap it, then there should be an action. Wrong flow. Yeah, my note wasn't great. So your flow goes to the wrong place. Let's say you are here in the menu of this content, and you tap Warlord phase, and then the flow accidentally sends you to the village token path. And that can be very disorienting, confusing for players, especially that there's rarely a good way for them to try to fix it, because they can always try to go back, but most likely if they just select the same thing, it's just gonna go to the wrong place again. So those are very common sort of things that happen, that the flow should not have gone here at this point. So you just have to fix those one by one. And if this happens during a playtest session, then just try to solve the issue for the players that, okay, what you should see here are these steps, and you can maybe have a way to bypass that and can get players back on track with the tutorial. Hopefully at the playtest phase you don't encounter these things anymore, and you were able to go through your content enough times when you built it that you have been able to weed this out. But things happen, and sometimes one button in one menu just does something that it shouldn't. Repetitiveness is one very common complaint from playtesters, that we got the same information over and over again. And this can sometimes be a challenge because you want to walk players through their first turns, and you want to make sure that each player gets the necessary information that they need. And a good principle to remember is that rather explain a bit too much than a bit too little. And because of this, there will always be players who feel like, it should have gone faster. But it's better to get that feedback than getting the feedback that the tutorial was going too fast. It felt like it was skipping information, or it didn't remind us of the important things when it could have. So it's better to have people think that Dized is stupid because it explains too much, rather than Dized is stupid, or Dized is stupid because it doesn't explain enough, or I'm stupid because I'm not understanding this. So because right now the tutorial is more or less built for the same tutorial for all the users, try to focus a bit more on the casual board game player and not the geek who understands everything very quickly. That's why the Dized has the forward button. They can go through the content faster if they need to. Sometimes steps are just too long. There's if you start to have 3 or especially 4 lines of subtitle in a step, it's very easy to just put too much information on one step, which is not easy for players to understand, and very often a text that long is also difficult to animate. So you might have an animation that has nothing to do even with the text, which is obviously not very strong when you're trying to teach players how to do something. So in those cases, try to make the subtitle shorter or break it into 2 separate subtitles. I actually just yeah, about that. Also, if you ask players to do an action, make sure you think about where do you put that action in your subtitle. Because if you start, which I think is often good to, if players need to do an action, start with that. They open up the step, and before they even skip forward, the first thing that says, now move your meeple. And then you might have an additional sentence. Remember, you cannot move further than blah, blah, blah. So there could be an additional piece of information there. If you do it the other way around, players might easily just see the step. Remember that you can, yeah, I already know this, and they can might tap forwards without ever really reading or getting so far in the subtitle that they realize that there was actually an action that they needed to perform. So make sure that you design that part well, and that players do the actions when they are supposed to do them, because later on in the tutorial you're assuming that they did do the action. This is something that at some point we will also make a bit better in Dized, so that the UI will already show you a different kind of forward button if you need to perform an action on that step, so that the UI also supports that message. But right now there is nothing like that, so the forward button is always the same, so just make sure that your content tries to do its best to have players do the actions when they're supposed to. Sometimes the info, even if your subtitle is not too long, it can be confusing. I'm coming up with an example here, but in the cases 2 towers are already filled and the score tracker has not reached 10 points yet, players cannot move their meeples across the ditch unless the king is in their castle. So just there might be a string of information that's just players listen to it and they go, what? And in those cases, just try to reform. Maybe you build 2 separate steps of it where you just explain like one thing at a time, or change the sentence structure so that it's easier to understand, or instead of having one long sentence, make it a 3 5-word sentences that are very easy to understand. So then yeah, well, last thing I had on my list is just a simple rule errors. Kind of like what I said earlier, that sometimes there might be just simply info missing. Sometimes there's just a simple error with rules that your tutorial just by accident it teaches players an incorrect rule, and sometimes this even happens that you're teaching the rule that's in the rule book, but then publisher has noted that yeah, that rule is wrong. Actually, this is how you're supposed to play it. We didn't catch it when the game went into print. So these might be can be frustrating things to fix, because it's like, so now I need to do extra work because of because the rulebook had an error in it. But it's unfortunately it's sometimes like that. The most of the issues are typically quite easy to, like fixing typos and things like that. So they're quite easy to fix. There are cases where you realize that you need to do a major flow change. It's very unlikely that if you have designed your tutorial well from the beginning, that you have to create a whole new sort of animation segment, like several steps, or that you need to completely delete a lot of work you did. It's oftentimes that, okay, this segment, yeah, this was not a great spot for it. I need to move this here. I need to reorganize this structure here somewhat, that this actually works better. So those tend to be possibly the most laborsome things to fix, depending on how comfortable you are with the tweaking the flow and everything. So just make sure to record those problems, and then before you start tweaking your flow, if there's an issue with the flow and you need to reconstruct your whole sort of basic structure of your flow, make sure that you design it first, and you know exactly what needs to be and where, before you start moving them around. Because fixing like something like that in a major scale, or doing a bigger change, you probably need to do a lot of tweaks into logic blocks here and there. So make sure you design it a bit well, maybe draw it down on a piece of paper or something, so you know. what you want to do. But this is for the playtesting session. So once you have your tutorial at a point where you can start playtesting it, get people who don't know the game, distance yourself, and watch people use your tutorial, and make notes yourself and observations. People might not need to even say anything to you, but you already know that, oh yeah, I need to fix that. Okay, players were confused here. They didn't say anything specifically, but I already know how to avoid that moment. And then they will, during the session and after the session, they will have questions and notes about the content, and just record them into maybe that sheet or whatever tool you want to use, and then just fix them one by one. And with that, your content is almost ready to be published. In tomorrow's session, we will talk about the final tweaks for your content. So the final polishes you want to do, the final bits and pieces that you put in place before the content is then published. So yeah, that's tomorrow. Thank you so much for today's session, and it's time to get diced.